Well, let's start with the day's market action. The Lal Street saw the biggest weekly fall that we've seen in 6 months, slipping for the third week amidst rising COVID concerns. Now, Friday's session recorded the biggest losing streak that we've seen in 3 months. So BSE companies erased market cap gains of the entire quarter in the last 3 days alone. Prashant is standing by to take us through the market action. A sea of red, Prashant, that's how we've closed this week.
Well, deep in the red for the markets today. The Nifty ending about 1.8% lower. The Bank Nifty seeing some correction, and it was sharp. Mid caps and small caps even more, 3.5% and 4% cuts respectively on those two indices. Almost a bit of a purge in the broader markets is what we had, and that's an area which is dominated by retail and HNI, etc. And that is where maximum cuts were, and that sense of panic, which I think the market is completely not used to, was prevalent today, was present today. Sectorally, I think except the pharma index, most of the sectors lost, but the most were PSU banks. Forceful pullback continues there. Metals, energy and oil and gas, which came under a fair bit of pressure. Nifty, only 3 names were in the positive. I think, so let's leave it at that. 47 out of the 50 names in the red. Broader losses, as I said, PSU banks is a space, so names on your screen, IOB, Union, UCO, defense names continue to pull back. It's a long list of very large volume-led losses that we had. The bigger question for market participants is, for weeks, actually months, everyone has been used to buying the dip every day and making money, and buy the dip sooner rather than later in the day. But it's not worked yesterday on Thursday. It's not worked today as well. So the question is the texture of the market changing a little bit as we come into the fag end of this year? Global participation in terms of volumes, etc., is also thinning out. So price moves will seem exaggerated here and overseas as well. But I think the big question is the texture changing at the margin? Back to you.
Is the texture changing? Well, certainly no signs of Christmas cheer, at least this week, for our markets. Prashant, many thanks for joining us. The winter session of Parliament has come to an end, with both houses being adjourned 6 days ahead of schedule. Key legislations like the Banking Laws Amendment Bill, the Data Protection Bill and the Bill to amend the Banking and the Insolvency Law have been pushed to next year. Now, Parikshit joins us with the details. Parikshit, really not much to speak of for the winter session. The government actually never moved any legislative agenda to start with, and once again, Parliament closing ahead of schedule.
So this Parliament session had just 13 sittings spread over 17 days. 9 bills were passed by both houses out of 25 that were identified for consideration. Ahead of the winter session, as per the Parliamentary Affairs Minister, productivity of Lok Sabha was 97%, Rajya Sabha at 103%. Among the key bills that were passed were the Energy Conservation Amendment Bill, Bill to expand the list of scheduled tribes, Anti-Maritime Piracy Bill and the New Delhi International Arbitration Amendment Bill. Very rightly, there were some very important bills such as the Banking Laws Amendment Bill, the IBC Amendment, the Data Protection Bill that were not brought in this session of Parliament. Discussions are still going on and they will be brought in the budget session. We also saw the opposition taking on the government over inflation, over unemployment, over the China clashes at Tawang. 12 notices were rejected by the Rajya Sabha chairman, and the opposition was wanting a discussion on the floor of the House. That did not happen. We also saw at the end of this session sparring between both the opposition and the BJP on why the House was adjourned, cut short 6 days ahead of schedule. The Congress said the government never really had any agenda. They also wanted to use COVID as an excuse to blame the Bharat Jodo Yatra, and the BJP on its part said that this House was adjourned because everyone had agreed and everybody wanted the House to be curtailed ahead of the festivities, Christmas and New Year. Back to you.
All right, Parikshit, many thanks for joining us. As I said, not much to speak of for this winter session of Parliament. Now, the recent Supreme Court and NCLT judgments have sought to give primacy to government dues over bank dues from companies that are undergoing insolvency proceedings. The former Bankruptcy Board Chairman, MS Sahu, and leading lawyer Bairam Vakil said that this can in fact damage the bankruptcy process and raise the cost of credit for companies. Take a look.
We have a judgment from NCLT Chandigarh, that's versus Assistant Commissioner of Income Tax Department versus Anil Goyal. They have been guided by Rainbow, and they are essentially saying that the statute has created a security. So if that is the thinking of the government, they want to consider security by fiction of law, not by actual security. So you have to consider the consequences it will have, particularly on the availability of credit.
I think there seems to be a rethink. This is something entirely in the government's prerogative. They decided, keeping with international precedent, that the government dues could be low in the waterfall. Because so I hope that the waterfall, as you have very correctly described it, is not upset too much, because then all you do is hurt the banks, increase the cost of credit.
Well, banks concerned about that likely change in the IBC, but of course these are amendments that are still on the discussion table and have not been moved yet. Now, stakeholders have also raised concerns over the data protection draft bill overriding the RTI Act and excluding personal information pertaining to bureaucrats, elected leaders, from being shared. Ashmit Kumar joins us now with more. Ashmit, you've been tracking the stakeholder consultations. Take us through the chief concerns that are being placed on the table.
Well, the DPDP bill, we had nearly a 120-minute long stakeholder consultation with the minister looking to address some of these concerns. What are the concerns that have emerged? Well, amongst the concerns, number one concern that has emerged is that as far as the DPDP bill or the data protection bill overriding the RTI Act, what the DPDP bill essentially does, data protection bill, is that it says that irrespective of larger public interest, personal information regarding bureaucrats as well as elected leaders will not be shared under RTI. So personal information could include your personal wealth, your assets, disclosures which are ideally sought for propriety, that will no longer be available under RTI. The response that the minister gave is that, look, privacy is a fundamental right. It supersedes the right to information, which is not a fundamental right. Other concerns that were raised on the penalty clause. The penalty that is levied under the draft protection bill says 500 crore rupees of maximum penalty. The feedback that has been forthcoming from various startups, in fact, is that this should be a percentage of the revenue so that the pain is commensurate to the size of the company, so that small companies pay small and the big companies pay big. Other concerns that were raised were issues of compliance. There's a concept of consent manager that has been introduced, so I can nominate another person B to be my consent manager for giving consent to an intermediary. The concern that has been raised is that this is a new middleman that has been created and could cause compliance concerns. Finally, the issue that was also raised is the issue of age gating. There is a separate criteria required of consent required for minors, for people below the age of 18, which again raises issue of compliance. So a number of these concerns raised. The response largely has from the ministry has been is that it will welcome feedback coming in from various stakeholders, but at the same breath also pointing out that this is a new age for intermediaries as well as for online companies, and that business as usual will not continue, and that a new sense of responsiveness will be the norm going forward. So with that, the stakeholder consultation, we understand, will continue. The comments, the bill is still open for public comments till January of next year.
Ashmit, many thanks for joining us. Well, the IPL Mini Auction is underway, but the bidding war has already witnessed some record-smashing buys. Jude is standing by with the action. Jude.
Well, what a session it's been. 3 IPL records in just one IPL auction session, with the likes of Ben Stokes, Cameron Green and Sam Curran going for big money. In fact, Sam Curran netting the record for the most expensive IPL player in the history of the tournament at a record 18.5 crore rupees. Not too far behind, of course, Cameron Green, upcoming Aussie all-rounder, for about 17.5 crore rupees. Even as a veteran and England's World Cup winning all-rounder, Ben Stokes going to CSK for the joint third highest IPL bid at 16.25 crore rupees. But others haven't been far too behind. In fact, Nicholas Pooran just a little while ago going for 16 crore to the Lucknow Super Giants. So big bids there, big spending by top IPL teams. But let's remember also some interesting names going unsold. The likes of Joe Root, England's test great, and of course Riley Russo, who were of course poised to do quite well, if not very well, not exactly getting sold in this round of the IPL auction. But for now, and as we have been reporting, IPL teams are spending big in getting quality, big-hitting all-rounders for their respective IPL teams.
All right, Jude, many thanks for joining us. That is the latest there from the IPL auction, and we're going to be tracking that story closely. We will head into a break, but up next, the government steps up its vigilance over the spread of COVID-19. We talk to Dr. Gagandeep Kang, Professor of Microbiology at CMC Vellore, on the other side. Well, here is the latest on India's COVID trajectory. Active cases have declined for the fourth day in a row and stand a little above 3,300 as of early this morning. The overall change in COVID cases in the last 24 hours stands at 163. The recovery rate is still above 98%. Vaccination rates have also steadily risen in the last 4 days. Over 87,700 people have been inoculated in the last 24 hours. Prime Minister Modi chaired a high-level meeting to decode the COVID situation yesterday. We learned from government sources that hospitals are organising mock drills covering all aspects of treatment to ensure readiness in case India does see a rise in COVID cases. However, the government has reiterated there is no reason to panic. It has also said it's keeping a close eye on the situation in China. Meanwhile, the Civil Aviation Ministry plans to restart random testing of international passengers who will arrive in India from the 24th of December. 2% of arrivals would undergo testing. Our team of reporters gets us more on the government's COVID vigilance plan.
Government sources have informed that approval has been granted to COVID's nasal vaccine, and the option to take the vaccine is likely to be introduced on CoWIN app today. Centre is carefully watching the COVID situation in China and has taken note of the rising number of cases in the neighbouring country. On December 27, hospitals across India are slated to conduct a mock drill to ensure operational readiness for COVID treatment. The Union Health Minister and State Health Ministers will remain present at various hospitals during the mock drill, which will cover all aspects of COVID treatment, right from admission of patients to administering of oxygen and medicines. The Union Health Minister is scheduled to meet IMA representatives and other stakeholders from the healthcare sector on December 26, even as an ICMR study is underway to examine if there is any link between COVID vaccines and death due to cardiac arrest.
Well, the government will start random COVID testing of international passengers arriving in India from December 24th, 10 a.m. onwards. 2% of the international passengers will be randomly selected by the airline crew, and those samples that are found to be positive, they will be further sent for genome sequencing. The government has instructed the airports to ensure that the required infrastructure for random COVID testing of international passengers is set up well in advance. The government has instructed that whenever the deboarding happens, there should be proper physical distancing. Those passengers that are showing any COVID symptoms should be isolated in flight. And the government has also further said that whichever passengers that are arriving in India, airlines must try to ensure that they're vaccinated as per the protocol of vaccination in their respective countries. So all in all, if we see, the central government has issued clear guidelines for international passengers that are arriving in India. And this step is a major step by the Union Aviation Ministry as well as by the Union Health Ministry.
Well, as of now, I am picking up mixed feedback from hospitals. Hospitals, in fact, at this point in time, have a varying amount of vaccine inventory, with some having a limited amount of inventory to some possibly having more expired inventory. Now, what I am picking up is that the procurement going forward will depend on, say, for example, any new government mandates which have come out with regards to vaccination and how one should proceed. And separately, in terms of new vaccines such as the nasal vaccine, it will entirely depend on factors such as demand, again, in terms of any kind of government mandate. Lastly, some hospitals are seeing a spike in booster shots in the past 2 weeks. So they are seeing what they have described as a J-curve when it comes to booster shots and COVID-19 vaccines. But in terms of inventory, yes, they do have enough. Will they be getting much more? It will depend on how demand takes off.
Ekta, many thanks. And as we pointed out, the government has cleared Bharat Biotech's intranasal COVID vaccine as well. But we expect that to be rolled out in the private hospitals to start with. At this point in time, no fresh orders being placed for vaccines either by the government or by the private sector. As we've been pointing out, please do not go by unverified WhatsApp forwards, WhatsApp messages. There is no evidence at this point in time to show that there is any surge in India or that the variants that are currently in play in China are deadlier than the Omicron virus. And remember, both these variants have been in India for the last few months. The big global story: the committee probing the riots on US Capitol Hill on the 6th of January 2021 released its final report, declared that the central cause of the attack was one man, and that is Donald Trump. Also recommended barring the former president from holding office again. Facebook has moved to put the Cambridge Analytica case behind it. Owner Meta has agreed to pay a massive $725 million to settle the class action lawsuit, but Meta does not admit to any wrongdoing in the matter, says the settlement is in the best interest of its shareholders. Former FTX boss Sam Bankman-Fried is released on bail after he posts a personal bond for $250 million. He will be kept under house arrest at his parents' home in Palo Alto as he awaits trial for 8 federal criminal charges. And with that, it is time for us to wrap up this edition of Business 360. Thanks very much for watching. Stay tuned to the CNBC-TV18 Friday favorite, the Editors Roundtable. We'll take up the action on the markets and what we should expect going into next week.